My name is Erin Carlson, as mentioned, and I am with Oswego and Plainfield Wellness, and I'm so excited to be here today. I know she just mentioned a whole bunch about me, but I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more on how it relates to this presentation today. As mentioned, I have worked in community mental health and private practice, so all of my work has been in an outpatient setting. I specialize in working with neurodivergent people, kids, teens, adults, and their families. And oddly enough, a lot of times there's multiple people in the family that are neurodivergent. I myself am neurodivergent, and my husband's neurodivergent, and I have a high support needs autistic 5-year-old son. So, and I would say probably about 85 to 90% of my caseload of clients is neurodivergent. So I work with neurodivergent people and am in the brain of a neurodivergent person every single day. So, some things that we're going to talk about today, as for you guys as parents or educators, may sound different than a lot of the other things you're hearing today. And that is because the people that I'm talking about are different but not less. We have different skill sets and different strengths. Today we're going to talk about, first I want to introduce neurodivergence, what falls within it, what is it. We're going to talk about the brain and a little bit of neuroscience, because the brain plays an important part in ways we can support our neurodivergent kids and teens. And for those of us who are neurodivergent, it can be helpful to understand why our brain's doing what it's doing to help support ourselves and as parents. I'm also going to give you guys some tools to be able to utilize with your kids when we're done. So, to get us started, what is neurodiversity? So, I pulled a definition here that I like. This is probably one of my favorite definitions of neurodiversity. Neurodiversity describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in many different ways. There is no one right way of thinking, learning, and behaving, and differences are not viewed as deficits. I think in our society today, a lot of times those of us that are neurodivergent or are neurodivergent kids, a lot of what we talk about is what they can't do. The milestones they're not reaching, the behaviors that they're doing too much of or too little of in the school setting or home setting. But these brains are actually really powerful, and they're amazing and can do lots of great work. So each brain is wired differently. Neurodivergence is nothing more than brain differences and thinking differences and taking in the environment differently, right? For example, I do a lot of work with parents of neurodivergent kids and provide parent support. So I teach a lot of this to the parents of the clients that I work with. And for example, my brain has ADHD. Now, a lot of times people assume that means I can't focus or concentrate, and it's actually quite the opposite. I can really focus on things I want to focus on. ADHD is actually more of an inability to determine what sensory input we should be attending to. So it's not that we can't focus, it's that our brain can't decide what is the thing we should be focusing on. Okay. So, first I want to talk a little bit about the neurodiversity umbrella, because it's a lot bigger and actually includes a lot more of us than we realize. Now, this list is actually not inclusive, but there's a lot of things on here. So probably some of the most familiar ones, maybe ADHD, autism. Many of you have probably heard of like Tourette's or tic disorders. Some learning disabilities, including dyslexia, which is where we can mix up letters. There is dyspraxia, which is difficulties with coordination. Dyscalculia, which is where numbers get mixed up similar to dyslexia. And then dysgraphia, which is difficulties with writing. Kind of like our brain has a loose wire that doesn't connect right to our hand to tell us what to write. Down syndrome also falls within this. Other intellectual disabilities. Prader-Willi syndrome, which is feelings of never being full. Sensory processing disorder, and Williams syndrome. Also included within the neurodiversity umbrella is anxiety, and some people now are placing OCD within that as well. That's a whole lot of brain differences, and that means probably a lot of our kids may fall under this umbrella, and we may or may not notice. Now, with all of these, I think I'll use autism as an example. We're taught we're either less or more autistic. And that's not at all how it works. It's not like on this end, I'm not very autistic, and on this end over here, I'm very autistic. It's more like a pie. And there's slices of the pie, and all of those slices are areas that can be difficult or not difficult for that individual. So for autism, this may include things like difficulties with speech, understanding social innuendos. Another slice may be emotion regulation. Another slice may be sensory processing information. And they may need more or less support in each of those areas. I use my son as an example. He is 5, and though now he speaks, until he was almost 4, he was nonverbal. He would say words, but it was an echoing of words that he liked how they sounded. Now, my son taught himself how to read. He's 5, he's in kindergarten, and he's in a contained classroom. And he taught himself how to read and can read at like a 2nd or 3rd grade level already. But he can't carry on a conversation with you. He understands everything we say, and he can vocalize things. So he has different strengths than other autistic individuals that are in his class. So it's not more or less. It's just different. ADHD is also similar in that it presents differently in different people. It presents very differently in women than it does in men or boys. Okay, now some of the important parts. I told you we were gonna talk about the brain for a minute. There's a couple parts of the brain I like to talk about. The first, down here at the bottom, the brain stem. I'm sure we've all heard of it. It connects our brain to our spinal cord, and its sole purpose is survival. I use this example. It is the part of the brain that I used to have a basset hound dog. He died this summer, but Dwayne is my basset hound, and he had big floppy ears, and he thought he was ferocious, but he was not. So I talk about the brainstem with this. If I was a rabbit in my backyard, and all of a sudden this crazy floppy-eared dog comes running at me, my brainstem starts activating because I'm a rabbit. And my brainstem goes, there's a danger in our environment, and it's this floppy-eared dog, Dwayne. And then our brainstem communicates and sends chemicals all over, including like adrenaline and all sorts of other things to activate our nervous system and help us respond. So this is the thing that starts telling our brain we need to do fight, flight, or freeze and figure out a way to get away from that floppy-eared dog. Though it's not on this example of the brain, within that, above that area, there is a thing called the amygdala. And the amygdala also releases chemicals and gets our nervous system going when there's a threat. Now, the issue here is that our nervous system, in general, not just neurodivergence, can't tell the difference between a floppy-eared dog that's a hunting dog and is going to try to attack me, or my mom telling me to get off Roblox. No difference. So most of the time, the threat in our children's environment is us, parents, teachers, therapists trying to get them to talk about things, right? Now, another part of the brain that I like to talk to parents about is the hippocampus. One, I like saying that. But the hippocampus is responsible for some short-term memory, and it's the part of the brain that tells us we should determine how to respond to this situation based on how we handled other situations like this and how it went. So, I'm Rabbit, and last time I ran from a dog, I could get away from it because I'm faster than it. So I'm gonna run because that worked for me last time. Or I'm like a 12-year-old kid, and last time I threw a big enough fit that my parents caved because I just waited it out. So I need to do that same thing this time to get that same result. Now, our children's brains aren't necessarily thinking of it like that. They don't even know that they're doing that. Their brain's doing all of this while they're screaming and yelling at us and telling us they need 5 more minutes, and we know in 5 minutes they're gonna say they need 5 more minutes, right? The problem is, our kids, their brain is not fully developed until at least 25, minimum. Throw some brain differences in there, and it might be closer to 30, or TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, or other factors. Now, you probably heard that the last part of the brain that fully develops is the prefrontal cortex. It's behind our forehead, and that is the part of the brain, lucky for us as parents, that helps us make healthy choices for ourselves, helps with emotion regulation, it helps with scheduling, planning, time management, yeah, all the things we need them to do that they can't use that part of their brain yet. So when our teenager makes like a stupid decision and we're like, why would you do that? Their brain literally isn't fully developed, and so that's why they do that. Then if we add brain differences, and depending on what my brain difference is and where it impacts, our kids may respond or act certain ways based on where their brain is impacted when there are brain differences involved. Now, I like to use this as an example, as a really simple way to talk about the parts of the brain. So the brain stem in that lower area is the reptilian part of our brain. It's the most primitive part of our brain, and evolution, way back, it was like the first part of our brain. It is responsible for survival. Mammalian brain. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's the things that separate us from other animals as mammals. Feelings, emotion, connections, reward, that's all in that mid area of our brain. And then the neocortex up front and up top, that's the area of the brain that is thinking, planning, deciding, and that's the last to develop. That's the most advanced part of our brain. Now, I like this example because our kids, when they're in the brainstem and they're in this reptilian part of their brain, they literally do not have the pathways in their brain built yet to move from the survival instinct to being able to think logically. So, as I say to parents, they get stuck in their reptilian brain. Now, when we're stuck in our reptilian brain, our nervous system's on alert, and we think there's a danger in our environment. So this is when we get the fights, running to our room and isolating and slamming our doors, or like freeze fawn response, like I can't do anything. because they're stuck in that part of their brain. Now, this is an infographic that is from, I'm certified in this thing called synergetic play therapy, and it is all about nervous system regulation. And I like the nervous system a lot. And we're going to talk about it and how it relates to our neurodivergent kids. But for all of us, including parents, I think it's really helpful to learn this. Some of you may have heard of like polyvagal theory. There's lots of books on it. This is from synergetic play therapy. Lisa Dion, who is the founder of SPT, created this. So the top section is our sympathetic response. This is when we feel there is a threat to our environment. This is that fight or flight response. Our children can seem defensive here. They can feel almost like a pounding in their head, anxious. They can talk a lot, more than normal. Or, they could talk a lot. They get overwhelmed easily, disorganized, irritable, uncontrollable bouts of rage, aggression. A lot of times when I get parents in my office, I hear this phrase a lot. My child is so defiant. There's so much defiance. I'm like 90% of the time, it's not defiance, but it's their nervous system's having a response and it looks like defiance. So we need to figure out ways as adults to manage our nervous system to be able to be external regulators for our kids. Because remember, emotion regulation is in that prefrontal cortex that they haven't fully developed yet. So that means our kids have no ability to actually regulate their emotions fully, so they look to us as adults to see how we do it, to learn how to do it. You know, Lisa Dion also has, she's the founder of SPT, she has a saying, calm is not the point. And calm isn't the point. I hear a lot of parents or adults saying to kids, you need to calm down. Now I just had Taylor Swift in my head. Still going on. Very therapist of me, but I saw this other therapist on TikTok. She used this example and I love it. She was a school social worker, and she said that we say to kids all the time, do things to help you calm down. Well, they know what calm is or looks like, but they have no idea how to get there. It's kind of like this. If my husband asked me to build a shed in our backyard, and he said, just go back there, there's some wood, nails, a hammer, you'll figure it out. You know what a shed is, right? And I would be like, oh, I don't know how to build a shed. And he'd be like, just figure it out. You got this. Well, that's what our kids feel like when we just tell them to calm down. It's like they're not taught or don't have a manual for how to do it. So part of our role is to help them. Now, the state we want, which is not calm, it's neuroception of safety. It's this middle section. So this is, you may hear a ventral vagal response, which is like a polyvagal term. This is our parasympathetic nervous system. This is where we're regulated. Now, I keep saying regulated isn't calm. Well, what is it? Regulated is our ability for our mind and our body to be in connection where we can make healthy choices for ourselves. Right? So when our kids are like fight space and they're like screaming and yelling at us and we're like, we need you to understand why that wasn't the healthiest choice. They're in survival mode. They're not learning. That's not a teaching moment. So if we try to teach them when they're dysregulated, it won't work. Now, I use my son as an example of how regulated does not mean calm. Many of us might have heard of stemming, and we probably link it to autistics. My son stems. Well, at home he stems. And his stemming is movement-based. And as most of you can probably tell, with me, mine is also movement-based. I move a lot when I'm overwhelmed. So my son, he jumps, and he'll just jump in place. We have multiple trampolines in our house. Or he likes to jump off the bed onto a crash pad. Or he has this little chair that spins around really fast, and he will spin himself so fast in circles. But when he's dysregulated, he will choose naturally to do those activities. When he's doing that, it is an attempt to regulate his nervous system. That's why autistics are stemming. Now, those of us that are neurodivergent, our nervous systems, when we are in situations that, like school, that's not home or safe place, our nervous system is always on a little bit of edge. So that means our brainstem's kind of activated and all those things are going on in our head. And so at school, I had my son's IEP meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I asked about how much he stems in class, and they said he does not. He doesn't jump or turn or spin or anything. Well, that's very autistic of him. Because what he's doing is he observes what his peers and classmates are doing to see what's appropriate for him to do in the classroom. And if they're not doing that, he will not do it because as part of true autistic form, my son is a rule follower. So much so that his picture schedule, if let's say the music teacher's out sick and it's music day and now it's library day, he will go up to the para or teacher and show them the right picture even if he's going someplace else because routines are important for him. So he could be jumping up and down, spinning around 100 miles an hour, and he is at his most regulated state. And I can actually talk with him, and he takes it in and understands it. Where most of us as adults, we think if our child isn't looking at us or they're not focused and sitting and quiet, that they're not paying attention. Many times, the only way a neurodivergent can be attending to tasks is when there's movement. So that's why I say calm isn't the point. So within this ventral vagal state, we are also able to make appropriate choices, display a wide range of emotions, be in our body, be aware of our surroundings, etc. Now this bottom one is also a perception of threat. But rather than the top section that was more fight, this is more the freeze response. For those of us that are either have ADHD or have kids with ADHD or ADD, we may hear them or ourselves say, I just can't do all these things. I can't. And the things are like homework or picking our clothes up off the floor or what have you. A lot of times, those kids, for them it feels like they can't because their nervous system has gone into freeze or fawn response. So some things that can tell us that they're there is they can posture, they can appear kind of slumped over, they get quiet, withdrawn, they may not be motivated, wanting to sleep a lot, wanting to be alone a lot. All of those things can be signs of nervous system shutdown. Now, I want to spend a couple minutes talking about brain structures and variances that we will have within different neurodivergent populations. We're not going to go through all of them, just a couple of the ones I see most often. Now, with all neurodivergence, and that was that whole list of all those diagnoses, we all have variations in our brain. And each of them impacts different areas of our brain, which causes struggles in different areas because our brain, different parts do different things, right? Differences in connectivity of our tissues in our brain also impact sensory processing and emotion regulation. So for ADHDers, this is like, I can't determine what I should focus on. For autistics, it might be like, it's too loud in here, I can't focus, right? ADHD, a few brain differences. I saw this speaker once, and he talked about how neurotypicals and ADHDers respond differently in regards to motivation. A traditional student, a neurotypical student, shall we say, might respond well by reward and punishment, meaning if I turn in my schoolwork, I will get an A. If I don't, I might fail, and I want to get an A, so I will turn it in. The drives are very different for ADHD. If we're not interested in it and we don't think it's important, we won't do it. So you may hear from your ADHD kids, this doesn't matter, this is stupid, it's just busy work. I won't ever need to know this. It's because things that we find not important to us, we don't care about doing. It seems like a waste of time. That doesn't mean that they don't need to do them still. It just means we need to approach it differently as parents. Now, other things, ADHD, you see this word, dopamine regulation. So for me, my impulsivity within my ADHD looks like this. Add to cart, and my husband being like, why are there more Amazon boxes at the front door? So that's my impulsivity. But it's different for every person with ADHD. It may look like impulsivity of not being able to sit still. It may be impulsivity of like, don't touch that, it's hot. Okay. A big thing with those with ADHD also is fairness and justice, equity and fairness. If they perceive something as not being fair, we also won't be motivated to do it. We also won't be motivated to do it if it is not challenging enough or too challenging. Sounds easy for teachers, right? If it's too challenging, I believe I'm going to fail at it, so I will not even start to do it. If it's not challenging enough, kind of the first thing we talked about of it not being important to us, we won't do it either. This is not because our ADHD kids are being lazy, it's because their brain is different. So we have to figure out different ways to motivate them. For me as a child therapist, this may look like this. Let's talk about your Minecraft world. Show me about it. How did you problem solve? How are we running away from these, creepers, right? Now, within them talking about these things, we're talking about how they planned, how they determined where to place things, how they determined how many supplies they needed. That's all executive functioning skills. But they may come out of therapy and tell their parents, we talked about Minecraft. And I'm like, well, we did, but you don't know that the only way that you would talk about these things is by going through something you're interested in. Because if I were to ask you, now how do you plan on doing your schoolwork? They would shut down, right? It's fun. It's like a Jenga puzzle. Autism in the brain. Differences in brain connectivity affect social communication and sensory processing. Strengths can be in patterns, pattern recognition and attention to detail. For example, my son with his schedule and routine, right? For these kiddos, it is really important to tell them what's coming. Autistics, there is a lot of comorbidity with anxiety, same with ADHD. And there's bleed over between a lot of the symptoms. So my son, for example, a couple weeks ago, he had a dentist appointment in the morning, so he wasn't going to take the bus to school. I would bring him to the dentist and I'd bring him to school. So I had to prep him like days beforehand to tell him, on Thursday morning you have a dentist appointment. Mom's bringing you to the dentist and then mom will bring you to school. You're not riding the bus that day. Because if I would have just sprung that on him in the morning, we would have had autistic shutdown and screaming and lots of not funness. Right? ADHDers are the same. Both of these populations, too, need to know what's expected of them. part of my meeting with parents, one of the first things I ask them is, what are your expectations for your kids? What are the rules of your house? 9 times out of 10, I just get, well, like to be good. Well, what does that mean? And they go, well, the kids know. Well, what? Okay, well, I don't live in your house. Can you tell me what the expectations are? And then they can't. And I go, well, this is why they're not following your expectations, because they don't know what they are. So I look at it as part of our role as parents is to help our kids be able to make healthy choices and become independent humans, right? So they need to know I have an hour on the game, and when mom comes to tell me to get off of it, if I don't get off of it, this is the consequence. And if I do get off of it, this is the consequence, because consequences aren't just bad. So that way the child can make a decision about, do I get off of it or do I fight? Because they know what's coming. Probably the biggest complaint I hear from kids is, the consequences change and the rules change. One day mom says it's this, and one day mom says it's that, and it's different every day. Consistency for these kids. They need that. If I don't get off the game today, it needs to be the same consequence as if I don't get off the game tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. Dyslexia, the parts of the brain that are coordinate with reading and spatial reasoning and problem solving are impacted. Some strengths of our brains. We are really creative. We are innovative. We're really good at solving problems. I saw this young man once who, a speaker, and he said, you want to come up with really cool ideas and you want your company to be successful, hire autistics. Right? So the thing is, we need to tap into what they're really good at and what their strengths are, because the byproduct of that is they'll end up doing the things we want them to. So I want to talk, I know I've only got 10 minutes left, so I want to get to some things for you guys for homes. First thing is, establish routines and structures. I know this sounds cheesy. For autistic kids, they can benefit from having a daily printed out schedule. So they know what their routine is. Or having routines like, before you got to get on the bus for school, these are the things that need to get done. Creating sensory-friendly spaces. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to go overboard and have like all the things, because that's a lot of money. But I think it's taking into account what your child needs for this sensory space. So as I mentioned, my son is pretty outwardly seeking with his sensory regulation. So we have like crash pad, trampoline, all the things and stuff. We even have like a tent, a tunnel, all the stuff, right? Because that for him is how he regulates. For some kids, it might just be, I need a space where I can go and my siblings can't get to me. And that could be the sensory-friendly space they need. So it doesn't need to be something that costs a lot of money. Now, the biggest part to figure out, well, what do I know that my child will need for sensory-friendly? Ask them. They'll tell you. What works for one person that's neurodivergent will not necessarily work for the next. Everything is different. So I don't like to make assumptions. Some autistics do not like to spin and do not like to jump. Some do. Use clear and consistent communication. That goes back to if the rule is this, it's this every day, and if the consequence is this, it's this every day. But kids should know both of those things ahead of time, and not when we are starting to become escalated. If we make up a rule and a consequence right then and there, when we are escalated and they are dysregulated, it is going to turn into World War III. So the child needs to know ahead of time what the expectation is so they can make a choice for themselves. Now, speaking of choices, Most neurodivergents, you know what we want most? Autonomy. We want to be able to make our own choices. Because you know what the world feels like to us? Everybody else is telling us what to do. So there's really easy ways to do this. An example might be, rather than saying go eat breakfast, it might be, do you want to get dressed first or have breakfast first? And they might say breakfast, cool, or get dressed, but then they get to be the one that made the choice. Especially within the autistic population, I obviously won't have time to get to all this today, but there is also a large percentage of neurodivergents that have demand avoidance. So if we feel like our parents are just telling us one more thing we have to do, we will automatically say no and drag our heels into it, even if we were going to do it anyways. So like this might look like you come into your adolescent daughter's room and it is a hot mess, and you say you need to pick up all the clothes off the floor, and she goes, I was going to do it until you asked. Demand avoidance. Now other things, be an external regulator. I was working with a mom once, and she said, how do I help my child calm down when he misbehaves? And I said, so how do you respond when he misbehaves? And she said, well, screaming and yelling. And I said, never, anywhere, does screaming and yelling help us calm down. So if we respond with the thing we don't want our child to do, and we have a strong sense of justice and fairness, guess what we're going to do? Freak out, because Mom, you tell me to calm down and not get angry, but you get angry. Of note, neurodivergents, we also oftentimes have above average IQs, so they're really smart. This is just an infographic that I like that shows different ways to regulate your nervous system. I use this with my clients, and this can be done in a lot of different ways. None of this is a one-size-fits-all. I don't say to kids, what will help you regulate your nervous system? No. I say, pick 5 of these that feel good to you. And I encourage you to do that with your kids, so that way, if you know these 5 things that they said they feel good to them, when you see they become dysregulated, you just start doing those things. Don't ask them to do them. Don't invite them. I mean, you can. But if you ask them, they're going to perceive it as a demand, even though it's a regulating activity they said they like. I find that if I just start doing the thing, like coloring, the child will eventually join me. And that's what being an external co-regulator is when our kids are dysregulated. So, a couple of things to finish up, because we only have a couple minutes. Sometimes parents of neurodivergence, we need to do a lot of advocacy. This may be like collaborating with teachers and school staff. The cool thing is that social workers, counselors, teachers, a lot of them have lots of training in working with neurodivergent kids. The problem is every neurodivergent kid is different, so what works for one might not work for another. So work with the school staff and work with your child. Trust your children when they tell you, this is overwhelming or this is too much. Gaining an understanding of IEPs and 504 plans and what would be appropriate accommodations for your child based on their diagnosis. Encouraging self-advocacy skills. I'm going to give an example real quick. I have a lot of kiddos that can get things like extended time or can go to a different room to take their tests if it's too loud. And I'll ask them a lot of times, well, do you do that? And they say, no. Because they need to be the ones to go up and ask or remind the teacher, because the teacher has hundreds of students. They don't remember everybody's 504 IEP. And the kid may feel embarrassed about asking. So helping them come up with ways that they can advocate for themselves. Emotional and social support really is us learning how to regulate and manage our nervous system. Now, Is it going to go perfect all the time? No. Most of the time, it's not. Are we going to make mistakes? Yep. I've made like 5 this morning with my son. That's normal. What's really helpful with neurodivergent kids is telling them I messed up. From the adult. Helpful. Help our kids with social skills. Now, I hear a lot from parents, well, they can socialize, but they might not get the small stuff, like the innuendos and the like, maybe that person isn't actually trying to be our friend, maybe this is a trick, right? So coach them through this. Focus on their strengths. Remember, their brains are different, not less. If they're into something, go with it. Last thing, self-care for parents. This is really, really important with this population. I saw something that says that the parents of high support needs autistic children, the mom's brains and scans have the same things as war veterans. And I can speak from experience, that is probably true. I mean, I've never been at war, but I have wrangled a 5-year-old autistic who was yelling, "What the F?" in the middle of his speech therapy office, so that's fun. I think a big part is to be able to find your community, whatever that looks like, and celebrate and grieve that our child's experience and our parenting experience might be different than everybody else's, and plan. For example, if my husband and I are going someplace with our son, like the zoo, and we're meeting friends, we will always go separately in case we need to leave. And that's okay, we just adjust. This is a bunch of resources, including some books that I really like. I love Ania Daniel Siegel's work. Dr. Bruce Perry's work is really great. Aggression in Play Therapy, though it's more for clinicians, is written by Lisa Dion, who is the founder of SPT. And then this is just my contact information if anyone wants to reach out. I am usually waitlisted for clients, but I do a lot of parent support too. Parents of neurodivergent kids that need some help with managing things. Okay. I am going to step aside now. We are going to be all finished here, and I'll be over here in the front. If anyone has any specific questions that they have, feel free to come on up. Okay? Thank you.